So solving using the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula, I know I have it written down right there, but the quadratic formula is this equation right here. X equals opposite b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. This is just one of those equations that you have to memorize. I don't remember if the Park reference sheets have it on there, but it's just something that you're going to have to remember. So I always sing a song, and yes, it's weird, but so I always say x equals opposite b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Yay. Yeah. So I'm going to do it again. So opposite b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So where these a and c and b, what those come from is this equation right here. So whatever number is in front of x squared is always your a value. Your number in front of x is always your b, and the constant or the number adding at the end is always c. So it's the opposite of whatever the sign of b is, plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. So remember that plus and minus, that just means when it reminds you that when you take the square root of whatever number, you have to write it both as a positive number and as a negative number, because quadratics can always have two solutions. Now, this information that is underneath the square root, the stuff that's underneath this square root right here, is called a discriminant. Sorry, have to sound it out. And that's what's under the square root. Square root. And that's the b squared minus 4ac stuff. Now, we'll talk more about that later. Depending on what type of number the discriminant is, tells you how many solutions you will have. So we'll talk about that more later. I just want that to be in your notes right there. So this right here, this is our first example. So notice the equation was written as just x squared minus 5x minus 24 equals 0. So I wrote out the a value. Since there's no number in front of x squared, it would just be 1. So our a is going to equal 1. Our b is negative 5. And our c is negative 24. Make sure you circle those, you circle the sign included. Don't forget to include the sign in that. So it's going to be, let's go ahead and set up our quadratic formula. So x equals the opposite of b. So the opposite of a negative 5 is a positive 5, plus and minus the square root of b squared, so which is negative 5. Make sure you always put a parenthesis around it, so it's negative 5 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 24. So I'm just using this equation up here to write this information. And then divided by 2 times a, which is 1. Now, personally, in my opinion, I think it's easiest to go and find the value of the discriminant first. So I'll always go off to the side and find this information before I try to do all of it at once. So the square root, so negative 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 24. You can just type that into a calculator. Move all that over. So you can just type it in as long as you're careful. Squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 24. You can type all of that in, or I'm going to actually show it to you just so that you can see it. So 5 squared, or negative 5 times negative 5, a negative times a negative is a positive. So it'd be 25 minus 4 times 1 times negative 24. Okay, negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 24. Remember, you have to do the multiplication part before you can subtract, because it's 25 minus 4. So negative 4 times negative 24, negative 4 times negative 24 is 96. So 25, and that's a positive. Notice it gave me a positive 96. So that's a positive because a negative times a negative is a positive. And then 25 plus 96 is 121. So it'd be the square root, because this is all squared. Square root of 121, I'm sorry, is 11. So I would then write this as 5 plus and minus 11 divided by 2. 5 plus and minus 11, so x equals 5 plus and minus 11 divided by 2. Now, this is the same type of thing that we did for completing the square, where you had to write it once as a positive, once as a negative. So I'm going to write it as 5 plus 11 divided by 2 and 5 minus 11 divided by 2. So 5 plus 11 is 16, divided by 2 is 8. You have to do this stuff up top first and then divide by the 2. So 5 plus 11 is 16, divided by 2 is 8. So x equals 8. And then 5 minus 11 would be negative 6. All right, throwing pencils. Negative 6 divided by 2 would be negative 3. So x equals negative 3. You can always check, remember, solutions or when it equals 0 are just the roots. So if I type in x squared minus 5x minus 24 and hit graph, I have a negative 3 and I have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So those are your solutions. Now, the reason I gave it to you as today's work, it's a worksheet and not on Schoology, is because I'm going to check to make sure that you actually did this. Yes, you can find the solutions by just using your calculator, but I'm not going to accept your work if you just write down these two. You have got to show the quadratic formula. Yes, I found this information by typing it into the calculator, but that's fine. You need to still have the 5 plus and minus 11 divided by 2 and do that step, those steps. All right, let's do the next example. 4x squared plus 11x minus 5 equals 15. Now, notice on that formula that you wrote down just a minute ago, is it was set equal to 0. You have got to set it equal to 0 in order to get your answer. So the first thing I need to do here is get it set equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 15 and subtract 15. So it would be 4x squared plus 11x minus 20 equals 0. Okay. Now we need to write out our A, B, and C. So our A is 4, our B is 11, and our C is negative 20. So for our formula, opposite of B, negative 11, plus and minus the square root of B squared, so 11 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 4, times C, which is negative 20. All divided by 2 times A, which is 4. Okay, again, I'm going to go off to the side and type in this information in my calculator. So I'm going to do 11 squared minus 4 times negative 20, which is 441. So it would be the square root of 441, which the square root of 441 is just 21. So that is what I'm going to use here. So it would be negative 11 plus and minus 21 divided by 2 times 4, which is 8. Okay? Go and write both equations, and again it's x equals. So we have negative 11 plus 21 divided by 8, and negative 11 minus 21 divided by 8. Oops, sorry, that blue is hard to see. Let's see, maybe the orange will be better. So then you need to type in negative 11 plus 21 divided by 2. So negative 11 plus 21 is 10 divided by, oh, I typed divided by 2. Whoops. So it'd be 10 divided by 8, which is 1.25. So x equals 1.25. Let me move my calculator so you can see it. And then negative 11 minus 21 is negative 32 divided by 8. So negative 32 divided by 8 would be negative 4. So x equals negative 4 and x equals 1.25. You can always check your solutions by typing it into the graphing calculator and finding your zeros. But those are your solutions. So just make sure you type this into your calculator and then write it as 2 equations. That's the part that everybody always misses, is that you can have 2 solutions to a quadratic because it makes that parabola.